Morning, everyone. How is everybody?
Again, ready.
How are the rest of you? It's nice. It's nice to be sharing this morning with you, and so glad to see so many faces. We didn't know if we'd get sunned out on this day of liberation, if you'd be seeking freedom on the mountains, the sunlight on your shoulders, the wind in your hair, or what's left of it. We are going to do a little bit different today. The topic of attunement, really, it's the topic for people who are seeking something more in their lives. Whether it's a person who is in business, seeking to become prosperous, a person who is an artist, seeking to become a master of their art, or a person who is seeking mastery of themselves and freedom in yoga. Yoga means union of the soul with spirit. Attunement is the key, it's the secret. And what attunement is it's the willingness to get in frequency, get in alignment, become sympathetically resonant to that which we're seeking. And often the most powerful way is to get in tune with those that have that power already, because they're already vibrating, they're already expressing that understanding and that consciousness. Religion needs new definition. Portland is one of those wonderful cities on the planet where spirituality abounds and religion tanks. And it should be, because religion, one saint said years ago, he said, "It is a blessing to be born into a religion. It's a curse to die in one." Because the purpose of religion, the purpose of spirituality, isn't to create new prisons and new self-identifications. It's to give us access. It's to give us understanding, to guide our lives into behaviors, into experiences that help us discover from inside out what's true, so that we live in the truth of spirit, that we live in the experience of joy under every condition, of divine love as something that supersedes, whether somebody was nice to you or not, or whether you like what they're wearing or not, that it becomes, that other people's realities become germane and even more so central to our own. I think everybody in the world should at some time or another work as a waiter in a very busy restaurant, or serve as a nurse in an ER. I'm often stunned, and this is not a compliment for Portland. I'm often stunned at how insensitive the people of Portland are to other people's realities. In the simple moments of life, and I don't think it's just Portland, I just happen to be in Portland, so in the simple moments of life, these simple courtesies that express an awareness of somebody else's reality and making room to ease their path just a little bit. To pick up a dish, to open a door, to smile when it's not necessarily obvious. I opened a door to thank somebody. God calling. To thank somebody when they open a door for you. Just little courtesies. What it does is it takes and it expands your reality to embrace the reality of others. And I cannot encourage this group enough to start to look at their own lives and the behaviors of their own lives. Are you taking time to embrace and be courteous to those around you, to consider what might be helpful to them in the simple moments? I think you'll find that if you start to practice that increasingly, we might start a contagion in the Portland area, which would be all to the mustard, which would be absolutely wonderful. But you also find that your own heart will expand, your own sense of joy and richness. And you'll find also that it often comes back. I opened a door the other day for somebody, and they just marched right through as if it was their right. And, I was going to put out my hand for the tip. But it doesn't really matter. I felt good doing it. I could tell that, just little courtesies from inside out. On this path, on the path of life, if we want to find happiness, who's heard the Because I'm Happy song? Anybody here? Oh, you got to hear it. You got to listen to it. It is so dopey, and it is so contagious. It is just so fun. The guy's just, and he's got, and watch the video, they actually have got it's a 4-minute video clip on Because I'm Happy. It comes from a 4-hour clip that comes from a 24-hour clip of people just singing that song over and over and over, different people, and dancing to it and stuff. We should do things because we're happy, because of joy, because of freedom inside, because we feel the presence of God as our reality. And if we're not, let's get in tune with where that comes from, which is why these guys come. These guys come because they already have found that limitless happiness, that limitless joy. And they feel our pain. They feel our concern and need and yearning. And out of consideration for our reality, they take human form and they make themselves available. They make the teachings and the environments available where it's possible to feel what that looks like. And then sometimes people who listen and hear decide to do something about it. And one of those people was Swami Kriyananda, this fellow right over here. And he so heard the understanding and the mission and the gift that Yogananda brought into this world about not religion. He said, get rid of churchianity. Find direct personal contact with God inside. Get rid of the forms, get rid of the boxes, and start to live in the presence of that joy, of that spirit. That he decided to do something about it, and he attuned himself so perfectly to Yogananda, the light of God through Yogananda, the joy, that out of that came his own liberation, but also all of Ananda, which is why we're sitting here. And our job has been to attune to him and so on, because before I came to Ananda, I could see where my life was leading. Anybody? Can you see where your best efforts are going to take you? If you've got any age at all, you can tell where that train's leading. And the question you have to ask is it enough? Not is it good, but is it enough? Is it going to leave you feeling complete at the end of your life? Or at the end of the day? And if the answer is no, then look at who has what you want and start to tune into them. I thought we'd do something fun today. This is our last service for a while. We'll talk about that more in a bit. But I thought we'd start with listening to the voice. And it's a compelling little talk. This is the voice of Swami Kriyananda many years ago. And he's talking about yoga as a way of life. So try and tune in as you feel inspired. See if this takes you any place. I love technology.
When it works.
Kind of.
Our subject this week is an important one. It's yoga as a way of life. The picture of the yogi is somebody who renounces life, as most people know it, who goes off into a cave, whose definition of yoga is when he's practicing meditation, when he's sitting in yoga posture and doing various breathing exercises, that his spiritual practice and his practice of yoga begins when he comes back from whatever he has to do to keep his life going and sits in meditation. But of course, this is not the truth. It has to be an all-encompassing thing. Otherwise, what we do is it's sort of like an army. In fact, I believe this was the whole predicament of the Battle of the Bulge, where one part of the American troops went so far into enemy territory that they got encircled. They left the rest of the army behind. We have to advance on all fronts. We may be able to advance a little bit more on one part than another, but we can't advance so far. We can't put so much energy into one side that we let everything else languish. I remember a man I met up in Vancouver who was a wealthy man and had earned his wealth by himself. It wasn't inherited wealth. And yet he was apologetic for his success. He said that my real spiritual life begins, or I don't want to say my real, he said my spiritual life begins when I come home from the office and take off my business clothes and enter into my meditation room and sit down. I thought, what a pity, because after all, he has to do that kind of work. Why think of it as only stopgap? Why think of it as only work that he can do, that he must do in order to keep his home and make possible his spiritual life? Why not incorporate that into his spiritual life? We have seen too much of the austerity of monasticism, which seems to imply to everybody that unless you become a monk, unless you withdraw from the world, unless you can give your whole life to meditation and inward practices, you are somehow not quite yet a devotee. And in fact, there are many stories in the Indian scriptures that contradict this. There's one story of a sage in India, a yogi, who was advancing very well and had developed a certain amount of inner power. And one day there was a bird cawing loudly, a crow. And he was annoyed at the crow for cawing because it was disturbing his meditation. And he looked up at it angrily, wishing it dead, and the bird fell down dead. And he began to feel, well, my goodness, I really have developed power if I can merely look at something and kill it. And just then he had a vision, and God appeared to him, and God said, well, you have developed some power, but there's somebody who is much more advanced than you are whom you could learn from. And he was told in the vision where to go to look up this certain woman. Told nothing about the woman, just who she was and where she lived. So he went there, and he came to a house, and he called out to the woman, and the woman said, I'll be coming in a bit, but I'm busy. And so he was a little impatient. He still had quite a lot of ego, you see. And sort of impatiently he said, but my name is so-and-so, Sadhu so-and-so. And he thought naturally that would bring her running. And instead she said, I'm sorry, I'm busy serving my husband, and I'll be with you in a bit. Husband? How can husband be so important as spiritual things? And so he stood there sort of fuming, and then he heard her voice call out, be patient, sir, I'm not your crow. And he thought, my goodness. She somehow has the clairvoyance to know what happened. And so he waited patiently, and then she came out, and he talked with her. And he found out that, in fact, she was very highly advanced. But he was surprised because he thought, well, she's a householder. How can she be advanced? And he said, well, how have you achieved so much spiritual depth? And she said, well, my main spiritual practice, my main sadhana has been serving my husband. And that was an eye-opener for him. He'd never heard of that one before. And he went back and he was meditating and was trying to figure this one out. He finally had it sort of put together when God appeared to him again. And he said, there's another person who's more advanced than you are that I'd like you to meet. And he told him the name of some other person. It was a man this time. And he lived on the other side of the town that was nearby. And so this sadhu went into the town, and he went past the more or less respectable homes into the unrespectable places. And he found that he was passing through all the untouchable area and so on, and places where people who dealt in low things like butchers and so on were. And he came to this person's shop, and he found that he was a butcher. He couldn't believe his eyes. How can a butcher be a devotee? You work with meat and so on? This isn't possible. But anyway, he got to meet the man, and he found out that indeed he was even more advanced than that woman. And he said, well, how have you achieved this? And the man said, well, sir, it's by serving my parents. And so he learned humility. And he learned that spiritual practice is not just sitting in the forest and renouncing everything and being very austere and cold and in yourself, but that spiritual practice is a matter of doing your job in life, whatever it might be, to the very best of your ability, and more than that, doing it for God. Had that woman been serving her husband only as a man, had that man been serving his parents only as people, then they would not have advanced nearly so far. They'd have gotten good karma, but they wouldn't have advanced particularly high spiritually. It was that they offered this service to God. So what I want to talk about this week is not how can you live a worldly life and have fun doing it. How can you use yoga in order to have more fun living a worldly life. You find that that's a very common teaching in so-called New Age religion, that a lot of people will teach you how to use the power of concentration, how to use the power of positive thinking, how to use your faith in order to get yourself a new apartment, a better sofa, a better income, a new job. And so you'll go to these meetings and you'll hear people testifying as to how their religion helped them to become rich. And you just wonder if that's really all about. If so, then these yogis really have missed the boat. But the truth of the matter is, we can look at their lives and we can see what they've demonstrated, and therefore we can see what the truth of the matter is, because they have joy and the other people don't. They have God, moreover, and the other people don't. What we want to do is not use these things in order to become happy in our worldly life. It's to live whatever we have to do in a spiritual way, in a divine way. And that is a very important teaching, and it's something that I wanted to bring out in different contexts this week. But because we're talking about yoga, I thought I'd have a little fun doing it. There are 5 basic chakras, and there are 5 days this week that I have to teach. So I thought that each day I'd talk about one chakra and how it applies to a different aspect of this yogic teaching. That should be a little fun. After all, we have to do things differently. The whole approach of yoga, the one reason for speaking of this is that the whole approach of yoga is very different from what we understand when we look around us in the world. It's so important to realize the extent to which it's different. As it says in the Bible, "My ways are not thy ways. God's ways are not our ways." And we have to really revamp our thinking if we are to understand the spiritual ways, because we constantly tend to try to see things in old references, in old ways of doing things, in old in old associations. And it's very important, therefore, that we try to break those old associations and tie them into totally new meanings. The definitions that we give to our work should be totally different. Yes, we have to work. We have to work to support ourselves, but we shouldn't be working to support ourselves. We should, that would be the opposite of the whole teaching in the Gita, action without desire for the fruits of action. We should be working to serve God. We should be working to serve God in people. We shouldn't marry just for the sake of marriage. We shouldn't try to marry in the old context. We should try to create a new context, a context of seeing God in each other, a context of, as that woman did, serving God in each other. And so, giving an entirely new definition. Remember what Jesus said, and it's one of the more important passages in the Bible, although it seems not very important on the surface of it. 2 shall be working in the fields. 1 shall be taken, and the other left. What does this mean? It means that it isn't what we do that determines whether we are taken. Whether you work in the fields or in a monastery or in a church or teaching or anything that you can do. Sitting in a cave, meditating, all of these things, they're not in themselves important. God isn't pleased with you if you're a monk or a married person, if you're a yogi or a non-yogi, if you live in a cave or work in a factory. What you do outwardly is irrelevant, relatively speaking. You can get good karma with certain deeds and bad karma with others. But even there, the intention has a large part to play in it. What we're really talking about is the intention. That when you have the right understanding, when you do things with the right motives, you can do all the same things that other people do. And yet you will find God and they won't. Because you do it with the understanding that you are living for Him. So I'm not trying to say, and this is why I try to dress more normally than I used to, because I used to come out in an orange robe, and I liked long hair. When I grew it in India, I came to like it. So I kept my hair long. But I realized that this was giving people a message that I didn't give in my talk. I contradicted with my lecture. Because it gave the message immediately that if you want to be a yogi, you've got to wear an orange robe and grow your hair long and live differently. You can't be an ordinary American. You've got to become an Indian. You've got to probably burn incense through the streets and wear beads and so on. And that's not what I'm trying to tell you. That's not what Master came to teach us. That's why Master westernized so much of what he taught. He didn't walk around in a robe. He always wore a business suit, except when he was teaching in the church or giving religious ceremonies. But he wore a business suit, and he tucked his hair. His guru had told him to keep his hair long, so he kept it long, but he tucked it up underneath here so it wouldn't look long. And he tried to help people to understand that they don't need to change. They didn't need to change their style of life. They needed to change their attitude toward life.
So that is from a talk. Can you slide 8 down, please? That's when I take it out. That's from a talk from many years ago. It's out of an hour-long talk, and it was the beginning of Spiritual Renewal Week, which was then 5 more days of classes and sharings and stuff. But you can feel the vitality of spiritual awareness and awakening that he was trying to help us and has helped us to tune into. Our job, if we want the happiness, if we want to find ourselves free, can you unplug that for me, please?
Yeah.
If we want to find ourselves free, a friend of mine, when I came to Ananda Village back in 1985, when I moved there, I was working with a man who had been at Ananda Village from the very beginning. He'd been there for quite a number of years, but then left for a dozen years and was just freshly back. And I asked him, I said, how does it feel to have put down this pattern of life, this commitment to finding wholeness from inside, to have just been gone and now to be back? And he said a very remarkable thing, and I say this to everybody. He said, I've discovered that it really doesn't matter what I did yesterday. It doesn't matter what I did last month. It doesn't matter what I did last year. And it doesn't matter what I'm going to do tomorrow. What matters is what I'm doing right this minute. And if I'm focused on the right things, with the right attitude, holding myself in the right way, nothing else matters. It's everything. We tend to think of spiritual vitality, spiritual power as being a function of time. Well, he's been on the path for 30 years. And I want to read something that came from this weekend. This has been a remarkable weekend. We had a beautiful wedding that reflects so much of God's love. And it was doubly touching because their families came and they spent the weekend or the days around the wedding serving their families, giving to others instead of being focused on themselves. And then we had a remarkable 4th of July celebration the next day on Friday, and well over 100 people. I think I ran out of fingers and toes around 130 people, but there were more. It was just a rich celebration of joy, of friendship, of freedom, both outwardly and celebrating this great country for all of its flaws and all of the foolish things that it partakes in periodically. This country was born for this age and born to be the leader in the world, both spiritually and materially. But it will only fulfill that to the degree that the people within it hook themselves, harness themselves to a transcendent star, something more than self-interest, and even doing things because it's supposedly the right thing. We have to do it because God calls us. I'm going to detour for just a moment. We met with Mother Teresa many years ago, 1991. We had a conversation with her over in Calcutta. And she said something very interesting, because many people see the power of her service, and it was just one little lady, and she was about that tall. She was about 4 foot something. But you could feel this tremendous spiritual power in her. And she said, I do not go out and pick people up on the street because I think it's a good thing. Although I think it's a good thing. She said, I do not go out and pick up the poorest of the poor on the streets because I see Jesus in them, even though I see Jesus in each one of them. She said, I go out and I do this because it's what God has told me to do. And if God tells you to live in a mansion, if God tells you, whatever God tells you, that's what you should do. You should do it because it's what God tells you. We should be living our lives because we are so in tune with what God is trying to have happen through each one of us that we're doing just exactly that. So we had this great celebration, and 100 and some odd people came together in celebration of freedom and joy. We have friends come up from Palo Alto. We have friends come from all over. Many nations represented, many cultures represented, all seamlessly, having a great time. And it was put on by who? Us. So this is a letter written by a woman at the end of this. And this woman has moved to Ananda community recently. And she's not been on the path a long time. She's not a 30-year devotee. But these are her words. And I thought, this is a great way to wrap this up. This sense of how to be in tune and what we're doing right now and what a difference it makes. She wrote, "A huge heartfelt thank you to everyone for coming yesterday, and most especially for the dozens of hands who helped make the miracles of the day. At one point in the afternoon, I paused and looked around. Gigantic bubbles were floating, the games were on, people were chatting in the sun and shade. People were handling a few details. Kids were squealing around the piñata. The dishes were empty and the stomachs were full. What an amazing experience. Everyone has been kind to thank me because she took on, out of consideration for others, she took on leading and coordinating the event for that day. Everyone has been kind to thank me, but honestly, I could not have done it without all of you pitching in, many at the drop of a hat. Co-leading the charge with Pavani and Vajra has been a challenging and wonderful learning experience about trusting the flow, learning to relax under big pressure. I did not know this was possible. And thanks to Pavani's sweet example, practicing how to be civilized before the flurry of activity erupts, something I will take to my grave. I did not know what my life was going to be like when I looked up Ananda Portland Temple on the internet from my office in Dallas. I often think of those days when I sat studying the photo of the temple and just hoped and wondered. I don't know if you have visited it, but the Dallas Ananda Meditation Room is on a business park right off the main toll road, so it was incredible to see the Portland Temple in all its glory, surrounded by trees. When I asked, I was given a feeling, a hint, and I decided to jump. From the minute I arrived, this community has embraced me through my various phases of self-recovery and self-discovery and difficult moments, plus the happiness of sharing time and friendship. Living here is like what we were celebrating yesterday. Our country is in trouble. And what we choose to celebrate is what is working. The principles that Ananda was founded on and America was founded on. The desire for religious freedom. I don't know how else to do it, because the world has its own rhythm. I just keep celebrating what I can and showing up, even though I often feel like a tidal wave is poised just over my head, while the only thing keeping it at bay is a smile and my stubborn refusal to lay down in the road. Glad you are here to do it with me while we each work out how to keep loving, despite our physical conditions and individual situations. I know each of our lives hold many very real challenges and difficult decisions, and sometimes even heartbreak. Gazing out into the green yesterday while washing the millionth dish, I felt blessed to have personal experience, living proof from my own life that sweetness can exist and even thrive on this planet of dark and light. When the world at large seems to be losing its soul at an ever-increasing fever pitch, it is sacred to witness people lovingly cooperate and willingly have joy. My friends, let nothing extinguish that fact in your heart. No matter what decisions or changes occur in your life, when Yogananda said to never, ever give up, perhaps he meant this is the thing we must never let go of or give up on. The sweetness we are capable of bringing into the world, and the knowledge that everyone truly is reaching toward the same light. So that is what attunement looks like. Not because of long, long years, but because of a simple willingness to listen from inside and to feel. Gangamata and I have been on this path for some number of time and learning and serving and growing. And every one of us faces a sea change in their lives at various times. And we are, in fact, this is our last service for a period of time. We're going to be going on a sabbatical for about 3 or 4 weeks. I don't think our time in Portland is done, but I don't think we'll come back into our service in the same way. I look around, and every aspect of Ananda Portland and Laurelwood is being powerfully carried by people with deep and profound attunement who are drawing their power from them and pulling straight from the center, from the light, through these masters, through Swamiji, through us, through them, and bringing it, just like that woman wrote so beautifully, into this world. And as Swami has talked about, you know, once the seed is sown, seek freedom, don't linger. Our job is to grow and to help people find the power of spirit inside themselves, to help fertilize the ground, and then to keep moving. Because, as one saint said, a small tree cannot grow in the shade of a big tree. We have to keep moving out of the way so others can step in, because the growth that we've received, the power that we've received in our lives has come through the self-offering. And that's only come because there's been room for us to be in service, for us to be doing these things. If we want to change this world, if we want to bring light into this world, if we want to make a difference, it isn't how many organic veggies we grow, although that's important. It's the quality of consciousness we bring to the choices we make a difference. And that's what Ananda represents in this world. We are going to go and seek freedom on the mountains, the sunlight on our shoulders and the wind in our hairs. We're going to take about a month and really feel for God's presence, feel for His guidance on the next phase of our lives. And we want to, together, just bid you a brief adieu, because we will come back different. And we want to thank you for the power of these last 10 years and the power of the friendships that we feel and the ray of light that is going out so powerfully into this world through all of you and through the connections we all share. So thank you very much.
We have an opportunity to take this extended period of time, but we can take the time in every moment. And I think that's what our affirmation is reminding us today. It's in the moments. I was reminded of the book Saved by the Light. It was written by, is it Daniel Brinkley? Jamie and Darlene would know. And he had an experience where he was struck by lightning. And then he came back from that experience. And they asked him, well, what did you experience? And he, you know, and when I was reading the book, I thought he was going to talk about all these big experiences that he wished he had had, or the big experience that he did experience. But he said it was the moments that came back to him. He had like a life after death review. It was those moments. He said the moments when I wasn't kind to somebody, or the moments that I missed an opportunity to help somebody in need. It's those moments that we can all go on pilgrimage. Every single moment's an opportunity for us to feel for God's light. And so we're blessed. We were reflecting with our friends from Palo Alto the other day. Our work here in Portland has grown so much, especially in the last 10 years that we've been here. That's our barometer. But now we have a whole ministry team that is here to support everybody here. Our music team, our music has grown. Our school is wanting to explode into a whole new building that we're planning on building next year. Just every aspect. And so that gives us the space to take this chunk of time. But Yogananda said, take care of the moments, and the years take care of themselves. It's ultimately in the moments. Even as we're going to be gone for 4 weeks, what are we going to choose in each moment? To remember spirit, to be kind to each other, to share that love. So we want to, again, I also want to echo Daiva's words. Thank you all for your friendship. It has been a wonderful time. Somebody had given us a card that we were remembering the other day as we were, I think actually as we were remodeling the temple, and it said, to enjoy the flavor of life, take big bites. And so let's continue to take big bites together and just light the city of Portland, light this world up. It so desperately needs that light, that love, that consideration for each other. So, and we'll be back. Thank you all. Oh, sure. Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're going to end our service today with this, and then we're going to have a bunch of music, so this will be fun. Our service ends with, I attuned my life with thine. Now my life has become a long, unbroken inspiration. Thy fountain of bliss refreshes and delights me night and day, whether I be wakeful, fast asleep, or dreaming fondly of thee. Oh, what has become of me? Delight on overwhelming delight, endless, indescribable thrills of delight spray unceasingly over me. O aged nectar, wine of centuries, I found thee at last and will taste of thy sweetness forever, forever, forever. Moment of silence. And